Good, thank you. Good afternoon to everyone here present in room 3. 353, Nora Latin in Stockholm. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you who are joining us online. On behalf of our co-conveners, the SWA Partnership, IRC, SIWI, UN Water, and USAID, I would like to welcome you to this session, Creating New Champions, Enhancing Cross-Sectoral Links to Achieve SDG 6. We have a full room for those of you who are not here, so that you feel a bit jealous for not being here with us. My name is Catarina Albuquerque. I'm the CEO of the Sanitation and Water for All Partnership, and I will be your moderator throughout today's session. This is, as I was saying at the beginning, a hybrid session, meaning that we have this beautiful, wonderful, fantastic audience here in Stockholm, but also a virtual one. So the session will be in English, but we have interpretation available into French and Spanish. If you people here in the room want interpretation, please use your phones. Just download the Interaction app, use the code WWWeek2022, choose our session and select if you are participating on site or online. I hope you understood what I said. This afternoon session will last 90 minutes, and you know that at World Water Week everybody's very punctual and they will kick us out of this room in less than 90 minutes. I will first share with you the conclusions of the perception study that inspired this event. Then we'll hear from two organizations in our sector that will talk about their experiences in reaching out externally to other sectors. And then we'll have a panel discussion on how, this is why we have these chairs here, or stools, on how we can work better together to align efforts with other sectors. There will be interactive moments throughout the session, so the virtual audience, although will not be able to hear you, you will please feel free to use the chat function or space to ask questions, to make comments, and we'll use them during the Q&A moments. We'll also put out polls to know more about your successes and also challenges when working with other sectors and with high-level decision makers. So I think it's important for the speakers today here in the room to stick to the time that we allocated you, so that there is time for interaction. Since we have a full room, I guess that there will be interest in joining, in speaking, and in asking questions. So, as I said, a summary of the perception study. As professionals in the sector, you know that we have often pushed ourselves to do better in reaching audiences outside the sector, to stop preaching to the choir, to move beyond the usual suspects, and, as I like to say, in a kind of a bit of a bellicist language, to conquer new audiences and to conquer new allies. This is what we are here to discuss today. For years within the water and sanitation sector, we have discussed effective ways to reach out to others, and today I think we have the opportunity to move this discussion to the next stage. If you ask professionals and leaders in any given sector, chances are that they will appreciate that achieving their own goals, be it on education, on food, on gender equality, on climate, you name them, the oceans, for example, SDG 14, they will mention that the achievement of their goals will depend on ensuring water sanitation and hygiene for all, always and everywhere. So these services are often accepted instinctively, as they truly are, as basic, fundamental human rights. Yet this is often not reflected, and we know this, in national policies, national budgets, in financial decisions. When we knock on the door of those outside our sector or high-level decision makers, we often ourselves, we lack the language, we lack the arguments, we lack the knowledge to be persuasive, to touch the right button, and to effectively lift the prioritization of water, sanitation, and hygiene. So how do we become better, more efficient, more persuasive? How do we change things? Building from important work of some of our partners, such as the ones I mentioned, IRC, UN Water, CIWI, we undertook a targeted research at SWA to understand how external audiences perceive water sanitation, the water sanitation and hygiene sector, to explore what messages resonate with them. How should we frame what we are saying, what we are writing, in order to be able to conquer them, to bring them on board, and to transform them into water and sanitation champions. So our logic was, if we can learn how to show others how our sector can deliver their aspirations for the future, we harness their expertise, we harness their passion, we harness their resources, their time, their money, their people, their enthusiasm, everything, and they can help us deliver on water, sanitation, and hygiene. So this is the result of the perception study that we undertook, and I will take 10 minutes to explain it to you. And of course, the results, we were thrilled throughout the study, and we thank USAID for the support in undertaking it. But we were also thrilled, surprised at learning, at reading the results, and we felt we want to share them, and we thought that this was a good place to do it. So we held in-depth interviews with over 200 professionals in 6 different, I'm a bit exaggerated and I said over 200, it was just 200. I tend to be a salesperson. So 200 professionals in 6 different sectors, and you see them here: economic development, humanitarian response, human rights, education, climate, and health. So these are the people we talked with. And the information from these interviews was then supplemented by interviews with advisors who worked with heads of state and or heads of governments. And the participants themselves, including heads of government departments, commissioners, directors of public bodies, CEOs, former and current heads of intergovernmental agencies and NGOs, senior academics, and international activists. And these are some of the people that we have interviewed. Paul Hunt, who is the New Zealand Commissioner for Human Rights, he's a former UN Special Rapporteur. Lillian Best from the Central Bank of Liberia, then Asaf, a resident coordinator of the UN, Carol Bellamy, the former executive director of UNICEF, who chaired the Global Partnership for Education, Aparajita Gogoi from the Center for Catalyzing Change, and William Durban from Opportunity International, among many others we talked with. I think that getting people like this to talk, just the fact that we got people like this and others to talk about water and sanitation for 1 hour was already, in our view, a powerful advocacy activity. We collected information around 3 topics. Number 1, what was their perception on water, sanitation, and hygiene on the sector? Number 2, what are the incentives, but also the barriers to us working closer together? And last but not least, recommendations on the messaging that our sector should use, adopt for more successful collaboration. There were 8 main findings in the research, and I'm going to summarize them to you as quickly as possible. Number 1, key finding number 1, good. We are perceived as a high-cost sector. So 1 in 5 of those interviews, they perceived that enhancing access to water, sanitation, and hygiene was expensive. It was seen as the single biggest barrier to increasing prioritization of the sector. Interviewees told us that messaging focusing on return on investment was key to counteracting this perception. And for example, the SWA sector ministers meeting this year had one of the topics was the economic return of investing in water, sanitation, and hygiene. So maybe this is the positive message that we need to convey. We also found that we can tailor this messaging to the audience. For example, audiences that care most about identifying fiscal returns on investment and hard statistics were heads of state and economic development professionals. Surprise, surprise. Education and human rights professionals, they care more about the social return on investment and the different ways communities benefit from improved access to services. Key finding number 2. Outlining the risks of inaction seems to be a powerful message. And I know that I've heard many of us talk about the costs of inaction. It works. It should work. At least the outsiders of our sector, they think it's a powerful tool, argument, approach. Different sectors gave us a range of useful messaging advice on this. For example, economic development professionals said, focus on how poor access to services undermines economic growth ambitions. Education professionals reminded us of the risks of poor services on people's lives. And humanitarian response professionals said we should highlight the immediate risks of poor water, sanitation, and hygiene services. But health professionals asked us to highlight the long-term risks. So we should keep this motto in mind. We need hyper-tailored messaging according to those we are interacting with. Number 3. Framing access to water, sanitation, and hygiene as aspirational resonates well. So many respondents were very positive and enthusiastic about the transformative power of our sector, picturing the world we want to live in at the latest by 2030, telling stories of how achieving water, sanitation, and hygiene will change people's lives for the better, will be a revolution in women's lives, in children's lives, in poor people's lives, etc. Many respondents were very positive about the transformative power of our sector. They recommended messaging highlighting services' potential to change communities and families' lives for the better. This could mean framing our services as something that people and communities are demanding to help deliver on their aspirations. For example, so that girls can attend school more regularly or have more free time to open a business, allowing women to work, etc., etc. And on a personal note, I feel that when I interact with ministers, decision makers, etc., bringing it down to the people, bringing it down to the concrete stories on how lives were changed, impacts on people. I was talking today with a minister who ended by saying, after I told stories, this is what we are here for, to serve the people. Key finding number 4. Other sectors often focus on just one element of the WASH acronym. So the 3 elements, the water, the sanitation, and the hygiene, are not equal in the eyes of external audiences. Well, to be very honest among ourselves, not even within the WASH community, to be honest. Respondents often spoke about one element and much less frequently as of WASH. Some useful findings included, for example, the humanitarian professionals indicated that a secure supply of clean water in crisis zones is a much more pressing need than the supply of sanitation and hygiene. Education professionals, on the other hand, prioritized hygiene most, and nearly every single education professional considered hygiene as a highly important element of their work. This presents several interesting communication insights, such as relying on an assumed knowledge of WASH in our communications could alienate some external audiences. And at SWA, this is something we are trying to get rid of, the acronym WASH, always using the other, well, you have been also pushing for it, Patrick, always referring to the words water, sanitation, and hygiene, so as to make it less cryptic to outsiders that we want to bring in. Finding 5. The power of water and sanitation and hygiene to increase security is seen as a key strength. And when we talk about security, it can be national security or personal security. For instance, linking it to the reduction in violence against women. And of course, in terms of national security, I don't need to preach to you. I wanted to highlight here a finding that I found particularly alarming, although not entirely surprising. There was a perception among those interviewed, that a lack of means of redress for vulnerable groups and low political returns were two huge barriers that hold back political prioritization. We were told that communities impacted the most by inadequate services are often not a priority because they vote less and are not able to complain so loudly. We could talk a lot about this. Redressing that imbalance is something that must continue to inform our communications and advocacy. Key finding number 6. Consider legacy when engaging high-level decision makers. So we found in the interviews that water, sanitation, and hygiene can offer political leaders a way to leave a lasting political legacy. And this was mentioned across all sectors and regions. A focus on the long-term benefits of investing in the sector can therefore be an effective way to engage high-level decision makers. This could mean, for example, developing national or presidential compacts for the sector. These efforts can shift the perceptions of political leaders so they can see improved access as something they will be associated with long after they have left office. Key finding number 7. It was recommended that our campaigns and initiatives in the sector consider political cycles where appropriate. Terms of office, both national and local, often offer both opportunities but also threats to communications, to advocacy, particularly when we are engaging with high-level decision makers. Consideration to political timetables while planning campaigns will help avoid the strategy being derailed by political events. And it can offer the opportunity to establish water, sanitation, and hygiene as a political campaign issue. Okay, finally, key finding number 8. I think I'm not stick. No, I am. Não estou. There was a general perspective that our sector works in silos. The sense was that we are an insular sector that can be overly complex and technical. Surprise, surprise. That means we need to frame exactly how water, sanitation, and hygiene fits with bigger priorities of leaders, governments, or other sectors. We should present ourselves as a central component for delivering on major issues like climate action, the global pandemic, child malnutrition, gender equality, health of the oceans, etc. Or justice, and you will hear about justice at the end. In terms of the conclusions, this was just a snapshot of the perceptions of those working outside our sector, but it highlights the critical importance for us in the sector really to take some steps back, and avoid assumed knowledge, avoid using jargon, avoid using technical perspectives. There is even less of a one-size-fits-all approach when trying to engage external audiences. If we make the effort to understand our audience and get it right, we can widen the global network of champions for water, sanitation, and hygiene. I will end here And I'll open now the floor for 10 minutes for initial reactions from all of you. Here, first those of you here in the room, and then those of you who are online. Do the results surprise you? Do they contradict some of your experiences when you are speaking with outside audiences? In your work, did you find other perceptions around water, sanitation, and hygiene that are helping your work, hindering your work? So while we are preparing a summary of the online comments, I would like to open the floor here in the room to you. Any comments? Any things you want to ask, say? Thank you.
Steve Senna, I'm the Deputy Chief of Party on the USAID WashFin project. I was just curious, I didn't know too much about what the content was going to be, but I'm wondering if you're going to be doing another round of this, because I'm wondering about like agriculture, climate, energy, and I know those are the common ones we talk about, but we're seeing a lot of sanitation can provide inputs to agriculture, for example, and often there's, poor coordination, especially at the local level. So just curious if there will be more, because it seems like a very interesting, comprehensive study. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we gather more questions? Yes, please.
So yeah, congratulations, really impressive. I'm Janaina Campoy from Lixil, and I wanted to know if you have found any sort of differences in different geographies. Is it a summary of a global? So yeah, just a little bit a breakdown in terms of geographies and differences.
Well, if you see the report, there is disaggregation by sector and by region. So please do go online and look into. I don't know all. I must confess that I don't know it all by heart. But if you go online, you will see much more data, much more granularity into the findings, as you were saying, by sector, by region. And now I'm being unfair because I jumped into your question, and I will answer yours just to be fair. No. To be very honest, so when we started this, we have been discussing internally, because two of the mottos of the Sanitation and Water for All partnership is that we reach up and we reach out to higher levels of power, but then also to other sectors. This is what we say we do, up and out. And when we started having these internal discussions, how do the others perceive us? And we talked with USAID. USAID found the idea interesting, and they supported the initiative. Of course, we didn't know what the outcome was going to be. Was it going to be interesting or not? It was a bit a walk in the dark, not knowing what would come out. We are happy for the applause and the interest, and I must say that I like your question a lot. We didn't think about it, to be very honest. We just wanted to deliver on this one, see how it was looking like, what people felt about it. Is it useful, interesting, or not? And then, of course, we can continue the dialogue with our dear donors and see if we can have a take two looking into other sectors. Yes, thank you so much. Yes, please. Do you have the microphone?
Well, ask a question. Along the line of my colleague from Lixil, my name is Julie Wechter. I'm with Dig Deep. We're one of the only organizations serving the 2.2 million Americans who don't have running water. And I'm curious if you focused, I understand that you disaggregated geographically. Did you also look at national versus local perceptions?
No, we didn't.
Okay. Yeah,
No.
just be curious about how people view WASH, on a more localized level compared with those who are focusing their efforts nationally.
Well, thank you again for the question. No, we didn't. Also, look, also because of the sample size, we and because well, we also wanted to be able to compare. We didn't go down that route, and also because I am not sure about the amount of people we had. I don't know it by heart. From the local level, would it give us the mass enough evidence to be able to delineate and identify trends? But yes. Yes.
Could you say something? My name is Tino Tenda. I work with ADRA. Could you say something about the time frame for the data collection? I'm asking because, obviously because of the pandemic, these past 3 years, there might have been certain things in the data that are influenced by COVID. So for example, hygiene promotion in the last few years has been done like never before. It's been a bad time to be a germ or a virus in the past few months, and that could have that made us look at WASH in a different way, which might not have been how we normally look at WASH. And not
during COVID. It was during COVID. It was during the last 3 months of 2021. Okay.
And I wonder how you corrected for that.
I'm sorry.
I'm wondering how you corrected for that, seeing as more resources could have gotten into WASH just because of COVID, rather than it being how we normally resource and prioritize WASH.
Yes. Yes, it's a perception study. What are you saying, Mark?
So I'm saying it was a qualitative perception study.
Exactly.
So we weren't screening in the way
No.
that you're suggesting if it had been a large-scale data set. But it's a very good question, as
No,
indeed
of
is the
course.
question of local perception.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Okay, one last question then, because I'm being told to wrap up. The gentleman here from Dig Deep. Yes.
Hi, Kabir Thate, also from Dig Deep. We're focused on the U.S. Were there any noticeable differences between, or synergies between, high-income nations and low-income nations organizations through this? Like any potential trends between high-income nations that have organizations focused on international WASH versus...
Look, I don't know. No. I don't know in the sense that there wasn't that specific disaggregation between somebody, because also many of the people interviewed, some of them have both experience in high income, in low income, or they come. So we didn't do that type of disaggregation. So many of these questions reveal to me that you haven't read the report. So I encourage you all. Sorry, not wanting to be mean to anyone. But I really encourage you to read the report. I really think it's fascinating and interesting, and it's easy, and it's a quick read. It's really a quick read. Okay, so I will stop here. Right? And I will move to the next segment, which is, as I had told you, composed of 2 case studies. So let's move to the 2 case studies. The first one will be a strong example of what reaching up to the highest levels of decision making looks like. And I'm inviting here to the podium Loïc Charpentier, from Water Europe and a member of the EU Water Alliance. He will give us some insights from his experience in high-level water advocacy towards the European Commission's political leadership. You might have heard of the European Commission, which is composed of a president and several commissioners. It's like a cabinet, for those of you who are not Europeans, with different so-called, well, the commissions are like ministers, but responsible for the whole of the European countries. So the type of work that the EU Water Alliance was doing was aimed at the president of the Commission and the commissioners, the whole of them, the EU government. Loïc, you have 7 minutes. The floor is yours. I will be strict.
Thank you. I will try to stick on it. I will speak about the EU Water Alliance. So just Yep. It will be easier like this. Just need to, yep. In fact, it's an action that we ran 3 years ago, when we have the new European Commission appointed, and the objective was to raise awareness about water-related challenges for each DGs, so each ministers, for if I can say, the federal state of the European Union. And to do that, we reactivate the EU Water Alliance, because we ran this action 7 years ago for the previous commissions. And the objective to raise this importance for water was to make clear from the whole sector what are our key challenges and the key opportunities, and to match that with their portfolio. And to do that, of course, you need to stick with the political cycle that we have in Europe, but also to be clear how you can contribute to their own agenda, and also make clear what are your KPI for each of them. And to do that, so we firstly reactivate this alliance, but also open up the scope of this alliance. And it's why you have other organizations who join us, like Coalition Eau and the Women for Water Partnership, but also Wetlands or Carbon Disclosure Project. And the first step that we have to do is to write this manifesto. And to do that, we sit, of course, around the table, clarify all our positions, make simpler, give an inspirational vision for the commissioner, so what we call the water smart society, a society where we recognize and realize the value of water, where we make sure that we close the water loops to avoid pollutions and water scarcity, where we go for, of course, digitalization to facilitate management. We also push for nature-based solutions and also inclusive governance. And also to really make sure that we have the right terminology, the best expertise in front of each DG. We create small task force inside the coalitions, and we work on one letter per commissioner to request a meeting. And in terms of outcome, it's over the 16 letters that we dropped to all the DG plus the Slovenian presidency, because at that moment it was Slovenia who lead the council. We have 14 positive reply. And we have 3 types of reply, in fact. The first one, we have a meeting with the commissioner or the cabinet. And here we can see, compared to 7 years before, an improvement in terms of consideration of water challenges, partly related to energy or environment. After we have no meeting, so generally we drop a second letter to make sure that he really understands. And after we have technical meeting, and here it means that also to reach up, it's sometimes not the best. And if we really want to have an impact, in that case it was really interesting, we have a cross meeting between 3 DGs. And this had a higher impact than reach directly the commissioner or the cabinet, because they might be not really in favor of taking care about water. And after that, I would like to stress 3 key elements for us also, because it's not a one-shot action. The commission is appointed for 5 years, grosso modo. So you have 3 additional elements that are really important for us. The first one is the pivotal role. When you start to work with the European Commission, you need to bring the broadest network that you have. And you have some members who have a very pivotal role, in the case, for example, of Women Partnership, that they make the connection with Coalition Eau. It's the case also of Water Europe, for example. They are managing the MEP water group, or the member of the European Parliament water group. It's an informal group of deputies in the European Parliament, and they are dealing with water. And so we were able to make the connection and follow up with events within the European Parliament. The second one, it's also to have, and it was in the previous slide, to monitor, but also to follow up. So each time we finish a meeting, we follow up with a letter. We also follow up with a midterm letter with the President of the European Commission, and also we develop a monitoring tool to check if they are really implementing the recommendation and the outcome of our discussions. And normally we should follow up at the end. And after we have also, thanks to this monitoring tool, check that we have first outcome. So in terms of legislation, so we can see in the legislation that the water-related challenges are taken into account. It's a case, for example, with the Energy Efficiency Directive. This is the acronym. We also see that the conclusion of the Council in terms of water challenges was, I think, positive, but Lesha is in the room, so maybe she will be more able to speak about that. And we see also in the strategy of the European Commission or the speech of some commissioner, and that was the case of the Commissioner for Neighborhood during the Cairo Water Week in October 21, where he mentioned the Water Smart Society in the partnership with Egypt. And also you have an indirect support. Each organization has documentations before the action, after the actions, and that we create echo with all these documents. It's also through the campaign, other campaign. For example, the European Union is now revising the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, so the big law for wastewater management. And you have some campaign like access to sanitation managed by some utilities. In that case, we echo, but also we inform the other members. And you have also events, and some of member of the coalition at the European Youth Parliament for Water participating in the expo in Dubai to mention these elements. And I have other one, but that is more for you, Lesha, because I really have no idea anymore. I cleaned my mind for that. But grosso modo, this action, in fact, start for 2-3 months, but we are continuing to work with that, and it will be also, it's the first step, in fact, for the next commissions. So normally in 2.5 years, we'll need to go up, and I'm stop here.
Thank you so much, Loic. I'll move immediately to our next case study, and let's have then a discussion at the end of the two case studies. Our second case study comes from Uganda. Helen, please, you are joining us. And it will be an example of reaching out to other sectors, in particular nutrition and health. Right, Helen? Good. It will be presented by Helen Kazuya, who is the lead in Right to Grow Uganda and Deputy Executive Director of Community Integrated Development Initiatives in Uganda. Helen, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Katarina. I'll start by talking about CD before I talk about Right to Grow. CD is a national NGO that is working in about 30 districts in Uganda, and we technically work around water, sanitation, and hygiene, but we're also doing work around food and nutrition security. And we have been in this business of water and sanitation for the last 26 years, operating in about 28 districts, both in development but also in humanitarian settings. I'm here to share about the Right to Grow. The Right to Grow Consortium is a consortium that is supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, and we are operating in 6 countries, most of them in Africa, but also working with Bangladesh. We have Mali, Burkina Faso, we have South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Uganda. And the case I'm sharing is a case that is coming from Uganda. It's a cooperation between international NGOs and local NGOs, and we also have movement for community development as part of the initiatives, because we want to ensure we have community-led initiatives. Technically, what we are working to see that there's end of malnutrition in Uganda, and we have a collaboration between the sectors. We are looking at the context. I'll not dwell so much on the context, but technically in Uganda, the context of WASH and nutrition is not very good. And we are using these statistics, but also the situation at hand to be able to make a case for the different ministries. How are we working within the Right to Grow in terms of reaching out? We are using the communities as the center in that we are ensuring that whatever we are working on is community-led, and the communities have an input in terms of doing advocacy, in terms of creating awareness, and then we are creating these linkages with the different sectors. The different ministries that we are working with traditionally are the Ministry of Water and Environment, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Gender, and then we have the overarching MDAs, ministries, department, and agencies, the Office of the Prime Minister, where the docket of nutrition is actually premised. We are also working with the private sector and also working with other civil society organizations to ensure that we have good research, we have evidence that is generated, and like Katarina said, that for each one of these actors that we are working with, we have a message that is tailored for them. For instance, just to rally what Katarina was talking about, for instance, there is a presumption that the Ministry of Health or health professionals will naturally talk about nutrition, and it's in their space of influence. But normally, when they are talking about interventions around nutrition, they'll talk about the nutrition specific. They'll talk about the vitamin A. They'll talk about the fortification. They'll talk about the diversity of food. But the diversity of food is actually connected to the food production. So how do you go to the Ministry of Agriculture and, influence to make sure that the extension workers actually have as food diversity as part of their key performance indicators? That's what we are doing. So if you're actually looking about water, the Ministry of Water will talk about health, and water will talk about water for domestic use. And the Ministry of Agriculture is so much interested in water for agriculture production. How do you make them talk to each other such that you're actually contributing to the same outcome? So what we are doing is, one, we have data that is generated from the communities, led by the communities. So we collect data, we undertake consumer perception surveys, we actually also do policy briefs, and then we have also intentionally worked out to have champions. We have advocacy blocks within Parliament, the Parliament of Uganda. We have the Parliamentary Forum on WASH, but we also have the Parliamentary Forum on Food and Nutrition Security. So what we have done as Right to Grow is, how do you speak to these different blocks and bring them together, speaking about the issue of water, okay? Such that the people who are pushing for food are actually interested in water, and the people who are actually interested in WASH or water, sanitation, and hygiene are actually also interested in water. So we have intentionally created these spaces as the Right to Grow to ensure that we reach out. But most importantly, we actually, if you can see here as civil society, for us, we are here as facilitators. We also want the communities to be able to speak to these people, because whereas there's that presumption that the people who are marginalized don't vote, they actually hold power. They have that power that they may not know. It's a matter of organizing them, and making them aware of the power that they have, so that they can actually voice. So what we have learned is that these people can actually make the noise, and the good noise, and they can actually be champions, and they can actually move from this space of being receivers, and they can move into spaces of power. Okay? Within another project where we're working, we have actually seen advocacy people coming from the communities and becoming local government leaders. So it's a possibility that we are working with. So these are the ministries that we are working with, and we are intentional, and we are targeting the information for each one of those. And for instance, if you're looking at Uganda as a country, the idea is that we want to have a transformed society by 2040. So the messaging that you're going to take to the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning is that it's not possible, it's not going to be enough to build roads, actually. It's not going to be enough to have the industries. You actually need to invest in the social services. Yeah, I'm done. Key takeaways. We must make a case by case for each of the ministries for it to be able to work. We must ensure that the community voices are not lost, because we want political buy-in. and we must utilize the planning and the political cycles as there, and then we must ensure that there is coordination and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Helen, and thank you also to Loic. It was interesting for me to see the similarities or some similar traits between the national approach in Uganda and your approach at a more at the European level with an international organization. The differences and the similarities, I think it was very interesting. We ran out of time for this segment. I will violate the rules of the game and allow one person to take the floor, ask a very quick question. 1 minute. Good. Nobody's interested. So let's move to the panel discussion. So I will ask so now we have a panel discussion. We will have more time. So those of you who even had some questions or are still thinking about what to ask, you can bring it up in this part. We have 4 panelists. I'll introduce them, and as I introduce them, I would like to ask them to please occupy one of these stools. We have Ms. Monica Medina, the Assistant Secretary of State for Oceans and International Environment and Scientific Affairs at the Department of State of the US. Yes, Ms. Medina, thank you. David Rax Molefa, who is the Chief Water Engineer in the Ministry for Lands and Water Affairs of Botswana. Mr. Afu Chantal Bengali. She's the Mali country director of IRC WASH. And at last but not least, Mr. John Mpambila Akudago, who is the director of International Shelter Initiatives at Habitat for Humanity. First, let's give them a round of applause. The round of applause, it's a vote of confidence. We trust that what you are going to say will be extremely interesting. But it's a way to thank you for having taken the time to prepare for this interaction and for being here today. So among the 4 of you, there is a wealth of experience in aligning and integrating water, sanitation and hygiene with other sectors and leading efforts to raise it in the political agenda of government. So I'll start off the discussion by asking all of you the very same question. What is the most important thing that we in the water and sanitation sector should be thinking about in our efforts to reach out to other sectors and reaching up to the highest decision makers? So let's start with you, Assistant Secretary Medina. You need a mic.
Thank you. So I found this, first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me to be here, and I'm honored and really humbled to be in this room of experts and to lend what little I can, hopefully, to this discussion. I will say that one thing that you have to have is a plan, and we do. We've, at the White House in Washington, come up with a new White House global plan on water security. And I think, when you're talking to leaders at the highest level, they need to have something like this as an organizing principle. I actually really resonated with the finding that appealing to these leaders' legacy is key. And I know that we've found that in the ocean space in particular, which is what I've done most of my work in. When you say we are going to preserve this place forever for the benefit of people, they love that. So I would say the most important things when you're trying to get leaders of governments to take action is to give them a chance to have something like this, a plan, because that's how they project their leadership, and that sense of posterity, that sense of their own fulfillment through leaving something behind for the next generations. I would say those are the 2 key factors for moving leaders.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you, Katrina. For us, I think experts have taken a lot of time developing strategies, plans, and everything. But the key elements that we're leaving behind was an evidence-based documents like data, so that you can showcase to your principals what you are really talking about within those strategy documents. In case of Botswana, we have national water security, we have IWR plan, we also have a sanitation roadmap. I think that one has 11 key activities that speaks directly to the political, that these are the things that you have to put in place so that everybody can have an enabling environment, so that it has attracted the NGOs, has attracted the private sector, and even the member of community, they can see themselves within that sanitation roadmap. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Afu.
Thank you very much, Katarina, and thank you for inviting me to join this session. It is a great privilege to be with you. And regarding that question, probably I will look at it in another angle in terms of dialogue. And when I'm talking about dialogue, it's more on positive dialogue, because sometimes we may have the data, we may have the evidence to go to meet those leaders, but sometimes we miss how to dialogue with them. And you have this perception that what we are coming to show to them has evidence, has data. We have this presumption and this perception that they know it. And sometimes that's wrong. They don't know it. And that's where we need to build on positive dialogue with them, to make sure that they understand the issue, to make sure that they engage with us in conversation, which is a very positive conversation, not just that we come and we show, this is ABC, where the problem is, this is how you need to take a decision. Sometimes, I think I found this one from my experience, not really working when you are really, you want to engage with decision makers. So I think we need really also in our work to take this approach of engaging with them on a positive dialogue.
Thank you, Afu. John.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me too. And it's an honor to be on stage with everyone here. I think from my point, the gap here is the way we communicate to the leadership of a nation. If you look at WASH, for example, it is an area where we have competing needs. The government is trying to prioritize some things, and sometimes they misprioritize certain areas because they don't see the direct benefits based on when they campaigned and promised people. So for me, I think we have to see WASH from a different angle if we are approaching the leaders, for them to know that there's really a value in WASH beyond just the thinking of a future health benefit. We need to see WASH as a raw material for other sectors. So if, and I agreed with the question that came from, I'm not sure I remember the name, from USAID, but you realize that WASH can create raw materials for other sectors. Agriculture can come in to play a role in WASH. Energy can come in to play a role in WASH. How we communicate to the government to understand that linkage would definitely let the government prioritize whatever message we bring to them and trickle it down. I think there's also another gap, and that is having the policy at the top and implementing the policy at the grassroots. WASH, we actually need the final implementation to know that we have achieved our target, and that is a big gap at the moment.
Thank you so much, John. So if I try to very quickly sum up the four answers, I would say, Secretary Medina, you refer to the importance of having a plan and to referring to the issue of, or to bringing the issue of the legacy. What is the legacy that you are leaving behind? David, you mentioned the importance of data, to have data and show the data and collect the data in order to inspire decisions, etc. Afu, you refer to the importance of making sure that the leaders are informed, that the leaders know what we are talking about, and that they understand what the sector is, what the sector entails. And John, you refer to the importance of making sure that the leaders understand that WASH creates, and I will quote you, raw material for other sectors. Let me go back to you, Secretary Medina, if you allow me. So when I think of you, I think of two things. Water, but also oceans. And the first time I saw you was talking about oceans, the integration of the two. And how do you deal with a double or even triple portfolio when you want to convince higher levels of power? How do you prioritize, and how do you bring water forward when you know that you might have, I don't know how many chances a year to bring the issue, number one. And number two, you were referring to the action plan. And of course, we all follow the announcement, even live, just so you know. And we are curious to know, how did it happen? Are there any lessons that you could share with the audience here on how to lobby such a topic up to a vice president level?
So thank you again for this question. And again, I want to say what an honor it is to be on this panel with people who are doing this work every single day. I would say to answer your question, on top of having a plan, then you have to have a strategy. You have to think, how are we going to actually accomplish what we want to accomplish? And when I think about the interconnection of water and oceans, or water and agriculture, water and energy, I think that what leaders want to see is, where are there double and triple benefits? So when we think about a water strategy, we aren't just thinking about water. We're thinking about, how does this impact climate? How does this impact oceans? How does this impact nature and biodiversity? And when we know we're facing this triple crisis of climate, nature loss, and pollution, when you can find and you can show leaders, here are the places where you can get a triple benefit for spending that money, you're going to get somebody who will want to pay attention. On your second question, how did we elevate this within the administration? I will say it was really committed activists who came into the government from having worked in these sectors, in the ocean sector, in the energy and climate sector, in the agriculture sector. Activists who came in and elevated the issue, made it clear what a priority it was. And then on top of it, I mean, I think, we're all faced this reality of climate change really impacting in such a tremendous way communities all across our country. It was not hard to get the attention of the leaders at the highest level. And in fact, right before I came here, one of the last people I saw was the Vice President's National Security Advisor. And she said to me, we want to do more on global water security. So I think they're making those connections between national security, between foreign policy and our ability to project security and peace and stability in the world, and water. And so I think it wasn't hard for us, which was lucky. And I think it will increasingly be a big part of what governments have to do. They just won't have a choice.
Thank you so much. Over to you, David. Tell us a little bit more about the Center of Excellence in Water. I understand it became a priority for the president and also for the country. How did it come about, and what made it a presidential action? I heard that the president signed an MOU with Yale University, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about it, please?
Okay, I think the credit would go to USAID. they supported us in glass process. Actually, what happened, normally I think the planning was more of not following data to support decision making. And with the glass, we were able to do the analysis of the whole governance, monitoring, and with that we did gap analysis. That report on its own, it have gone to the office of the president. The second thing was that we're able to develop the sanitation roadmap in there, which had strategic key areas to follow thereafter. And it cultivated the political will on relying on decisions supported by evidence. And our HE had more interest, and he asked us, actually the sector also took that opportunity to prepare or showcase on how we can partner with institutions. And one of the Yale University comes as one of the institutions that we can partner with that. And fortunate enough, our HE signed a memorandum of agreement with Yale University. And it covers areas of water security, it covers areas of sanitation, resources management. Actually, Botswana, we see sanitation as a resource, not as just a human excreta disposal, because there are a lot of things out there, energy, water, and fertilizer. So it's something that is at early stage, but we are hoping a lot from that. Thank you.
David, do you allow me to ask you a follow-up question now that you have the mic? At the SWA sector ministers meeting, your minister, Minister Nila, she spoke about water as part of Botswana's economic growth path, which is something that, well, we were discussing, and it came also out of the study. Also, what you were saying, Secretary Medina, the triple win. So, who are the key partners, and how are you coordinating economic growth through WASH? How are you putting this argument forward? How efficient has it been? And what could you share with other countries in terms of inspiring them to also use the argument of economic growth to argue for more investments and prioritization of water, sanitation, and hygiene?
Okay, our HE, the president of Botswana, has set 4 key priority areas. Okay. One of them is economic-led growth. The second one is building human capital. The other one is infrastructure development. And the fourth one is financing of the sector. And if you look at the economic growth one, you find that water print is all over it, because obviously when you talk about that, you talk about manufacturing. Obviously, when you do manufacturing, you need a lot of water. You talk about sanitation. One of the things that are you able to manage your waste properly, or your human excreta properly? And the fourth one is the hygiene. So these are the enablers of these key priority areas in all of them. And we have recently even ventured into triple P in the water sector because of that. Because if you know, Botswana is a water scarce country. We need investors in that area. So we are turning the resource, the sanitation resource, into a potable water through the triple P. We are also having water transfer from our neighboring countries, like Lesotho Highlands. We are intending to use water from the sea through Namibia. We are also fetching water from our transboundary with Zambia, Zimbabwe, and the upper countries there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Afu, some questions also for you. We are all here talking about political prioritization, the importance to reach up to the highest political level. But I think the majority of the countries, maybe all, I'm not sure, present here are democracies and hold elections. And holding elections, I always say it's problematic because you start working with the minister is enthusiastic about the sector, then there are elections, and there is another party in power, which is of course a great thing, but it means we need to start from scratch. So my question to you is, how many health ministers have you worked with throughout your career? And how do you do it? How do you start all over again each time? And are there any secrets in making this task easier, the transition from one to the other to the other? So how many ministers?
Okay, so thank you, Katarina. And I totally agree with you that change is good, but sometimes to follow also the change and to make sure that the strategies that we are developing, to make sure that you are also putting some impact in what we are doing. So for the many years I've been really in the sector and in my country, I've seen passing more than 10 ministers of health. There were even one who was nominated just for 1 hour. And
you didn't have the time to educate him or her.
So just for 1 hour, then it was changed.
Wow.
And we had another one. So that's what the first point I've made, this positive dialogue. That's what maintained me in my work of advocacy and working with them. Because when one come and left, one of the things I usually do is really not bringing only data, because sometimes you feel that the person has no idea about water, sanitation, and hygiene at all. So when you are coming to advocate for one of the issues related on water or sanitation or hygiene, the first things you usually tell to them is how important is this? What are the benefits for your sector? And most of them, and you have to bring now cases.
Stories.
Why is it so important to have water in a health center? And when you start talking like this, the minister will tell you, okay, so you are trying to tell me something. And you need to make it more very concrete examples. Like when you have a health center, the first thing, so when you come in a health center, is the water. Everything is done with water. Medicine are taken with water. So if that water is not clean, you who is the physician, the work you're doing, if you don't have a clean water, this patient has very higher risk, not her life or his life not to be saved by what you're doing. So when you start now putting those arguments and putting the relationship between the sector and what they are doing, you have more chances to bring them with you in the cause that you are advocating for. But if you are not able to say that and you just bring data, those are how many people who are dying because of ABC, they don't listen to you. So there is a way you have to talk to them, and there's a way you have to build that one. So we as IRC have been doing that work, and currently we have in the sanitation or the health sector, we have put now in place what we call a national task force for water, sanitation, and hygiene in healthcare facilities in the country. Why we initiated this one? Because we started facilitating this process since last year, and now we have officially a decree that was issued by the Ministry of Health to put this task force in place. Why? Because we need coordination, because we need to put in place a common vision for water and sanitation. What we've seen, this department has been working without involving any water people in their work. They have been working without even the sanitation department. And now in this task force, we have the sanitation department in, we have the water department here, we have the health that are in as well, and we are now facilitating, so we have a joint communication. We have a joint coordination and we have a joint vision. And I think that's what is really missing. And I was talking to one of my colleagues when I said that this research, for me, the results are not really surprising. Because I've been in this field, and what I've observed much is this way of working in silos. There is need really for collaboration, there is need for coordination. And for somebody who do not know the sector in Mali, we have 3 ministers, 3 ministries in charge of the water and sanitation. One for sanitation, and one for hygiene, one for water. So you see, already on the institutional framework is very hard. So you have really to come together. And now that I'm talking, this is not really what is happening. And that has an impact even on public policies that are being designed for the sector. Because you need to have the same vision, you need to have to develop joint planning to make sure that there is need for you to collaborate if you really want to meet the 2030 agenda. Otherwise, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for your very, very convincing, and I think that bringing it down to concrete examples, it's powerful. We see how you manage to convince the ministers. John, a last question. So you work, we mentioned it at the beginning, in Habitat for Humanity. So how are you making the case for improving water supply and sanitation in human settlements? You are the person inside Habitat International making sure that water and sanitation are part of the organization's work. So what are the arguments that you use, and what strikes the chord with the political leaders and with the practitioners? And after John answers, we'll open up for questions and answers.
Yeah, thank you very much. At Habitat, we have a core mission that we want to have everybody have a place called a home to live. And a home must have water and sanitation. Can you imagine if you wake up in your house and there's no toilet or there's no place to shower? Definitely after 1 week, I'm sure you vacate that place. So we have a big issue at stake. So many people are not having access to water and sanitation, and we need to justify that with also the housing gap that we need to meet both. So it's a big mantle for us. When it comes to working with water in a housing setting, it's definitely a big plus. In terms of financing, it is easy for somebody to walk to the bank and say, I want to take a loan to construct a house. But it is very difficult for anybody to walk to the bank and say, I want to take a loan for a toilet. The bank manager may not even listen to you. You may not get the worst chair in the bank to sit. So how do we contribute to that? Habitat has its own way. They have a micro-build fund where we work with different partners who issue some of these out in the form of loans to housing house owners to construct sanitation or wash facilities in general. Between I think Philippines and Nepal, for example, just within a quarter, we issue about 25,000 loans out to people, and most of these are incremental, for incremental building, that is installing housing, wash services in the house. Again, when it comes to water and sanitation, we look at water and sanitation from a holistic value chain process. We don't look at it like we are bringing in water to the house and that is all about it, or we are going to give you a toilet and that's all. We look at it, if we are bringing water, what can we use that water to generate? If we are going to deal with sanitation, how does that work in a value chain? So let me give you an example from Liberia. We had a slum that we did, a slum-wide project, wash project, and we were able to transform that slum, provided water, provided access to sanitation and waste management. But it was just not that. We managed to get the youth involved to be able to transform that waste into building materials. As I speak today, that project has become a go-see pilot for almost donors, for all stakeholders in Liberia. Even the Liberian government himself has committed money to scale up the project. And in the commissioning, they describe slums as not a nuisance, but as an asset. The other thing that we are missing here is getting the local people involved. Decision makers, we talk about political cycle. The local traditional leaders don't have a cycle. They stay there until they die. How is this campaign going to factor in the informal groups that are leading on the ground so that they can influence? Even when the president wants to stand for elections, they go secretly to talk with these local leaders. Can we bring them in to get them to influence the leaders at the top? I think that is something I would want to tell everybody today.
Thank you so much, John. Another round of applause. Very good, thank you. And I'm opening up the floor for questions and answers. We have approximately 10 minutes.
But there was something, Habitat is also having a global campaign on access to basic services.
Good.
So if you need any collaboration, we'll be more than happy to leverage.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this
Very
to
good.
do that, yeah.
Super. There is a question, there is an online question, and I'm a little bit hesitant to bring it to you. Maybe I exert censorship because it will derail us a little bit. But there is, the question is from somebody from a Spanish-speaking country. Diceu, it could be Portuguese speaking. No, but the person writes in Spanish. So, a Spanish-speaking country. Who says it will derail us a little bit. He talks about climate change, the importance of climate change, COVID-19 and economic crisis, as well as the war in Ukraine, that all of these factors, all of these crises are putting pressure on us achieving SDG 6. So his question is whether we should postpone the end date of the SDGs. No, we don't agree with you, dear Sel. No, I'm seeing the body language. What we need is political prioritization. Good leaders that make it happen despite all odds. Do you agree? Yes. Answer given to this Sel. Good. More questions? It didn't derail. Very good. Any more questions or comments?
Yeah, we were talking about coordination and the need of these actors to speak to each other. So I was thinking, what will be the kind of organization that should be leading this kind of platforms, ideally?
At the national level?
At the national level, yeah.
Thank you very much, Peter Thorning from Danish People's Aid. Thank you also for an interesting panel discussion, but my question really is to the presenter from France, if you remove your tie there.
Loic.
Yeah, Loic. So I really enjoyed this presentation and how we penetrate and enter sort of the European Commission at its highest level, a system which seemed to be quite complex by many of us. And so I was impressed by that, but it also made me wonder, do you also in your analysis look at who are actually our opponents here or our enemies? I mean, what are the other interests that you are actually up against? Like quite recently or last year, I think we realized that the car manufacturer Toyota turned out to be have invested heavily in the anti-climate change campaign somehow, for denying the fact that it was, I should say they've changed this policy now, but I mean, who are we actually up against? Have you ever considered that? Who does not want to achieve what we want to achieve in this room? Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting. Any more questions, comments? The lady at the back.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for these very interesting examples. I'm just wondering, is the mic on?
Yes.
Oh, and I'm standing. Oh no, I'm so sorry. It was really interesting to hear a little bit more about how you all work on advocacy, and something that I'm very interested in and very curious about to hear maybe a little bit more from your end is how do you really ensure that you speak kind of with legitimacy on behalf of the people that you represent? If we could hear a little bit more about this, I would very much appreciate that. Thanks. I'm Marijn Klevers. I work for Save the Children.
Any more?
So I was wondering if, because of course the importance of communicating with ministers and all that, but one thing that we do find in the work that we do is that the media, when we engage with media, it's really hard for them to understand sanitation and hygiene, and it's really hard to get coverage as well. And the feedback we get is that, you know, they need a stronger why now. Because, you know, building also on the question that we got online, so because of the war and everything, climate change and cost of living and energy crisis, there's so much going on. It's hard to get some sort of priority when it comes to coverage for sanitation and hygiene. So it's a question for the group. Now, what can we do about that?
To create the sense of urgency.
To create yes, and how we can get more media coverage and more media attention.
Because you are right. I think it's easier with water. The sense of urgency, right?
Yeah. And how we connect hygiene and sanitation to the other SDGs and, you know, to all these other issues that I've mentioned.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I will hand over to the panel. 1, 2, 3. We have 4 questions. Who should coordinate at the national level? Who are we up against? That's for Loic. How do you make sure, I think it's more for, well, the two of you, that you have legitimacy to speak for the people, on behalf of the people you represent, and how do we create this sense of urgency, particularly when we are talking about sanitation and hygiene? Who wants to go first? Good. I ask you to be quick, less than 1 minute.
Yeah, so communicating on the sense of urgency. I've already mentioned that Habitat is having a global campaign. We are actually standing in for informal settlements. And we are really getting this out because the COVID really proved that they were the worst or maybe the most vulnerable groups to deal with. And then also, if you look at what's you are talking about coordination between sanitation and other areas. Yes, water is really recognized, but sanitation has a problem. But we really need to let other sectors begin to see that sanitation adds a value to them. For example, right now, you can transform human poop into electricity. You can transform that into fertilizer to improve food security. So let's connect them together, and that would work. Thank you.
Thank you. Afu, well, maybe we go this way. Yes, Afu, go ahead.
Okay, so I will come on
Be
her
succinct.
question on the coordination or who should lead that one. Just a practical example in the case of Mali, actually, as what we do as IRC is really facilitating the process and influencing the process. And how we do that one, we work closely with the civil society organization. There is a national coalition of civil society organization that has really a very good legitimacy and that has many other citizens or civil society organization member of that coalition. So we work closely with them, and we are the one really capacity building them on advocacy skills and also all the process of advocacy. We are really working closely with them. So in the case of the task force I was talking about, how we put it in place, because that was really something we got many challenges in terms of coordination. And even the monitoring tools that we've been using to monitor indicators of wash in healthcare facilities, each actor, when I say each actor, I mean government has its own one, then international NGOs, we have our own, and everybody is just monitoring. The tools are not the same. So the time of reporting, we have challenges. And last year, IRC, we make the synthesis of the GMP report. And we had this national workshop to show the report of this GMP, and we found that the data for the health are missing. So the question were, are we reporting correctly? Are the indicators, are the tool conform, or what do we need to do? And that's how we came up with this idea of having this task force. And currently, the ministry is the one leading. The Ministry of Health is the one leading this task force and is the one convening all the meetings that we have every quarterly. Last week, we were in the cabinet of the Minister of Health, and that was one of the sessions just to report on activities, how we are coordinating. So the lead should be taken by the government, not by any development partners. It's about ownership. Thank you.
Very good. And obligations, legal obligations. Voila. Yes, David.
In the case of Botswana, we had a water sector reform because the sanitation aspect was all over in local authorities. So everything now is under the Ministry of Lands and Water Affairs. Our department is coordinating the sanitation and hygiene sector because it has many role players. And the other thing is that every year we do the sector review, and the report is with the team that we have established, the WASH team. It included all WASH line ministries, NGOs, and some private sector. And this, the reports from the sector review is presented at the RDC, which is chaired by our VP, the Vice President. But in terms of bringing on board media, I know it's easy to talk about water, but when you bring media on board, they sanitize sanitation. So it doesn't come out clearly. No. But what we did as Botswana, we started commemorating the World Toilet Day in 2019 with the help of USAID. And it's something that we are venturing to do it every year. This year we are planning to even start a week before the World Sanitation Day to have a sanitation. We call it sanitation piece, so like where everybody gather and talk about sanitation. And that's how we are going to spread the message and also try to woo the media to talk about sanitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I know we're almost out of time, so I'll be very quick and just say that hats off to civil society and to organizations like our USAID that make the stories real for political leaders who take those stories of communities that don't get heard and bring them to us. And I'll just finish with one story that I will never forget, having been in the Democratic Republic of Congo right after or during the pandemic. And our ambassador there lured a rap singer, a rap star from the country to do a rap about washing hands during COVID, and it went viral. And it just reminded me that even in places that you think wouldn't have access to information that way, something like that went viral. He's now like this ambassador has hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter. But that's how you get people's attention, and it got the government's attention, and it got communities' attention, and it got people's attention, and they washed their hands. So I believe it's all possible. We just have to find new ways to do it.
No, I know. Loic. You can Google, where was it? RDC, yes. Yes, Loic, go ahead.
To be also really brief, in this specific case, no, we do not map the opponent, but what was really more important due to the KPI and the timing was to map the right supporter that we will have. So why Water Europe? Why the European Youth Parliament? Why Coalition or Women Partnership? That was the most important to reach up. After, if I have to put the right drivers in the EU legislation, I take here Water Europe hat. Here I will spend my time to map the opponent and the supporter.
Thank you so much, Loic. This session is coming to an end. Let me just say some quick things. First, I would like to ask our fellow conveners, the speakers, the panelists, and the participants here and online. thank them all for their reflections, for the questions, for the discussion. Just as human rights are indivisible and interdependent and mutually reinforcing, this is a mantra that we like to preach. So too are the Sustainable Development Goals. Realizing one right or one goal rests on realizing the others, and understanding these complex connections can indeed be a challenge, as many of you were referring to, but it's imperative that we do it, because unblocking this interconnectivity presents a wealth of opportunities. So today I think we saw great examples of alliances, approaches, innovative ways to sell ourselves, to make a real difference. And answering your question, if I may, I'm giving myself the floor, about how do you create a sense of urgency. I think as we tap into other sectors and as we connect with other sectors, we need to understand what drives them. And I remember when we were at the Oceans Conference, at the session we were together on SDG 6 and SDG 14, I think that a powerful argument for those working on SDG 14 is you are talking of the ocean's economy. You are talking of the livelihoods that depend on the ocean. Without wastewater treatment, if we continue to dump our waste into the rivers that end up in the oceans, you kill the ocean's economy. And then you create a sense of urgency, because the seafood will be polluted and the people living from that business will not have a livelihood. So I think it's us learning more about the other sectors, learning about their priorities, and understanding how we can impact on them positively or negatively, and using those opportunities, the UN Oceans Conference, other conferences and other events, to tap into the media and to sell. I must say, I wrote an article about these connections, and I received a WhatsApp from a Brazilian minister saying, I wrote it in Portuguese, that it went viral in Portuguese-speaking countries about the connections between sanitation and the oceans. So I think that it's tapping into these occasions. Good. So to conclude, and speaking of new champions, which is what we need, I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage you to join our Justice Begins Here campaign that kicked off today. It's a sector-wide campaign that hopes to mobilize us to recruit new champions for the sector, raise awareness about the contribution of water, sanitation and hygiene to social justice and justice everywhere. Visit the campaign's website, justicebegins.org, to know more and support us. Thank you so much.